Hey, very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And you're listening to another episode of Coaster Kings Radio. This week's episode talks about SeaWorld San Diego. We actually just went last week, as you may have seen on our new YouTube vlog. We just haven't gotten time to really talk about it yet. But we figured, why not take you on the tour of SeaWorld San Diego, kind of discuss all the awesome attractions. It's a pretty prominent new coaster lineup, and what they have to offer animal attraction-wise. And yeah, that's what we'll do today.
I love this park. It's just so substantial in a way that I feel like, as much as we love all of the SeaWorld parks, this one kind of gets the least amount of attention because it's the least coaster heavy.
In the coaster enthusiast circles, for sure.
Yeah, in our circles, it gets talked about the least, and yet I feel like of all the SeaWorld parks, it definitely has the most substance overall.
I think it's also just the cleanest products. Now we must remember this is the original.
Polished. Yeah.
And it's also located on Mission Bay. So half of the park is on the ocean, on the bay in a way. So which is kind of nice. SeaWorld San Diego is unique in that regard because obviously Orlando is just in between city blocks, really. And then you have the one in San Antonio, which also has a nice location. It's on a hill, so you can kind of see all San Antonio in the distance. But for a park themed after the ocean, it is nice to have one that's actually on the ocean. And you can really kind of feel like it has the old bones because it's very big on landscaping. It's very much almost more gardening.
Are so mature.
There's more gardens than a Busch Gardens kind of vibe as we talk about it.
Truly the most gardeny of like the 7 Busch Gardens SeaWorld parks, entertainment parks, actually.
So we'll start off with the entrance of the park. We're just going to dive right in. So we'll start our tour with Explorer's Reef. Now, Explorer's Reef is the park's entrance that was launched in 2012. Or was it 2014?
Something like that.
Something like that. And it's actually the new entrance of the park that is filled with touch pools. So the first thing you do when you enter, underneath the big SeaWorld wave, is you enter an interactive touch pool area that has several touch pools, including feeder fish, sharks, horseshoe crabs, and then it also has incorporated in it several little cafes where you can either grab some coffee, some quick snacks, sandwiches. I think we had some wraps, pretty straightforward stuff.
Starbucks.
And then, of course, you have the main SeaWorld store right there as well.
Yeah.
Great merchandise, by the way. I think one of the better parks, just in general, that isn't like Disney or Universal when it comes to merchandise. We found some awesome California-specific SeaWorld merchandise. Really into it.
Republic of California SeaWorld merch.
So, of course, we bought a ton of that. If you want to look what it see what it looks like, you can hit up our YouTube vlog.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of it, we kind of showcase the design. Really, really fun. But yeah, that is actually, I think, my favorite entrance of any of the SeaWorld parks, entertainment parks, because it kind of throws you right into the action, but it does so kind of carefully. It's not overwhelming, but it also is immediately immersive.
It's so kid-friendly. It, like, you hit the ground running, and you have an attraction, like, right out the gate.
It's fun because at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, there's always activity, but also it's one of those entrance areas that doesn't get abandoned in the middle of the day. I feel like a lot of parks, the entrance area is just kind of like clearly an entrance area, but it doesn't serve much else of a purpose. Yeah. Now here it's nice because even in the middle of the day when you kind of casually scroll through it again after the orca show or whatever, or after doing the Sky Tower, there's always activity. There's people, touching, like at the touch pools, looking at the animals. It's really clever use of space because now the moment you enter the park, it's substance. The entire place, and especially in the front side of the park, we'll discuss the back side in a little bit, just all substance. And I'm just not used to parks. I mean, think about Busch Gardens Tampa, think about Busch Gardens Williamsburg, think about SeaWorld San Antonio or SeaWorld Orlando. All those 4 parks, the entrance is just kind of the entrance, and there really isn't much until you get to like the first major attraction. But at SeaWorld San Diego, the moment you enter, it's it's part of the park. It's busy all day long. Kind of nice, kind of different.
Definitely.
Now, off to the right, when you come in,
is Ocean Explorer.
Is Ocean Explorer, which is the next newest area, famous for its short-lived and absolutely horrendously awful submarine ride. We rode it like the opening month, and it didn't last long after. So I guess we're kind of unique in having that credit.
Terrible.
God, it's the funniest thing.
We waited in this long-ass line.
Yeah, we were with Brian and Caitlin, right? And we just kind of rode.
Yeah,
and we were like, wow,
this takes
forever to get on.
What is this?
And then we got on, and we're like, what the hell did we just ride?
So dumb.
But it's funny though, because at least lives in our memories. It was a fun idea. I look forward to seeing what they're replacing it with. But the area itself is quite nice because it also has a couple of flat rides. It has a pretty major, usual, what do you call that, swing ride, I guess?
Wave swinger, zero wave swinger.
Which is called Tentacle Twirl.
Little triage of kitty rides.
And it's a major restaurant, so there's food to be had. There's a little beer garden they've designed. Now, obviously, there's also some aquariums, not very, very large, but there's a crab and a octopus aquarium that are right where the submarine ride used to be. So the submarine ride kind of went straight over that, and now obviously that ride is gone.
I think the submarine ride, I know that like the rumor is that they're going to put a scream and swing in there, but it has like an extensive queue and like an indoor station. They should just put a kiddie coaster in there, or like
Could you imagine
a decent sized family coaster, like something maybe slightly bigger than the Grover soapbox derby coaster that they just put at Sesame Place, but like family, like a Zero, like Force One kind of thing.
Well, I still think a scream and swing would be nice because that just kind of gives a little more of an alternate experience, kind of something else. Because if you look at the way that the one looks at SeaWorld San Antonio, which again, thanks guys for the invite because you couldn't make it out. The way they themed it with the coral on the supports and the blue and the green, and it looks exactly like everything in this area. So I really think it'll be a great fit, and I think next to Electric Eel it won't be so overpowering. You know how sometimes these scream and swings just look too big and too almost like out of place. Like they're just massive, massive attractions that look kind of weird sometimes. But I think next to Electric Eel, which is a tall, supportful curtain of steel, I think it looks fine. And
I feel like they had room. They could have room for both. I feel like they could put 2 rides in this plot if they wanted to. I feel like the plot is because it was a tracked ride. It took up a lot of space. They've got more room to work with than like just a single flat ride spot. And the station is so substantial. It's such a big structure. Like I don't know if there's a way for them to repurpose it with a scream and swing. Basically, I think they can do both. I'd love for them to put a scream and swing like right out in front of it, and then have a coaster kind of wrap around it.
I mean, that's all really cute, but you got to remember they swing. Like you need to have that envelope outside of it.
Do they swing?
Yes, they do.
Are you sure?
You know what else swings? The launch on Electric Eel. So also part of the area is Electric Eel, which is the 2018 edition. A skyrocket to 150 feet tall. Nice thing about a park like SeaWorld San Diego on Mission Bay with the Coastal Commission. Kind of limiting high structures and all that kind of stuff. Rides like Electric Eel and Emperor really feel massive. They kind of have a 200 feet kind of vibe, despite being only 150 feet each in heights, which is kind of nice because I'm just not used to having skyrockets be standalones like that, not without their major taller coaster counterparts around them. So at SeaWorld San Diego, it really kind of feels like it's way bigger than it really is. Kind of nice. I like it a lot. Ride itself is a great fit for the park. Really cute queue. The way they approach this ride is really heavy on the landscaping, which is always appreciated. But they kind of created this like open air, dry heat, coral reef kind of vibe. So the brush and the landscaping doesn't really require any watering.
It's like succulent.
Very like light and landscaping and gravel and sand, which is easy to maintain. It really works with the Southern California sunniness. Overall, it's just a vibe. It's a really nice kind of landscaping choice that I haven't seen in many parks beyond SeaWorld San Diego. They really have kind of a particular feel to it. But yeah, I really like the ride. I think it's a great fit for the park.
Of all of like the SeaWorld Parks entertainment skyrockets, this one by far has the best presence because it doesn't feel like in Busch Gardens Tampa and Busch Gardens Williamsburg, the skyrocket was verging on unnecessary because it just didn't feel like it lived up to the expectations set by the kinds of coasters that these parks were building like in the 90s. But for SeaWorld, which has no expectations really for anyone for roller coasters, whether you're a coaster enthusiast or like a member of the general public, like or anything in between, you don't go there really expecting much from the coaster collection. So a ride like Electric Eel really satisfies because it's like when it opened, it's the park's looper, it's the park's like high profile thrill ride experience. So
I mean, it was the first time in recent history the park decided to use one of their select few opportunities to build over 30 feet. So how it works is they have a couple of exemptions with a max height of 150 feet, but over 35 feet. And it's kind of like a set number by the Coastal Commission. Now, there's maybe some parts in this that aren't 100% the correct terminology, but I'm just trying to paraphrase here. So, of course, they use one of those exemptions for the Sky Tower. Then they use an exemption for Electric Eel. And then now they've also used an exemption for Emperor, and back in the day they used an exemption for Journey to Atlantis. Now, if you wonder, well, how did build Manta? Well, Manta is completely dug into the ground,
it's so
where at no point it's
tall.
35 feet over the skyline. meaning it was allowed to go without that exception.
Very like Alton Towers.
Which is really, really cool because like if anyone that's ridden it knows that the ride really isn't that tall, but it does quite some things. That's because they dug out like at least 20 to 30 feet early on in the ride, which really helps with kind of hiding some of the taller, faster parts of the ride into the ground. Anyway, so because of that, the rides at SeaWorld San Diego that do stand tall, even if it's only 150 feet, they just feel massive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's so fun about Electric Eel. Besides it being a skyrocket, it's one of the few parks you don't just think it's an afterthought or a cheap addition.
Yeah.
When they added this was before Emperor. It was really like the biggest thrill ride the park had ever seen. And people still treat it like that.
People are crazy about
We were riding
this
Emperor
ride.
a couple times, and even people next to us were like, "Oh yeah, did you ride that one yet?"
Electric Eel.
Everyone thought Electric Eel was the biggest thrill ride in the park.
The hot.
Which I guess kind of makes sense because you look at that giant inversion suspended 150 feet high. Even though we obviously prefer Emperor, I don't think it's a surprise.
Yeah.
Electric Eel does have the clientele's heart, which is fun to see because I don't think I've ever been to a park with a skyrocket where the skyrocket was so popular. Maybe when Superman opened at Discovery Kingdom, it kind of had that. But again, that was before it was really a clone. At the other locations, like I just never really got that vibe.
Other parks like maybe like Canopy Lake. Of course, theirs was closed when we went. And like Zombie Ride at Bosque Magico, and maybe some of the European parks, it has like cultural significance or like local substantial significance. But this is really the only one in the United States that we've ridden that I feel like the general public is like really, really enamored with. Because even at Discovery Kingdom, the public's been distracted by other
Medusa is still the fave.
Medusa, Joker.
Of course, the Busch Gardens Tampa. Everyone seems to like Tigers, but it's one of those things where it obviously doesn't quite have the grandiosity.
Even Busch Gardens announced it alongside Iron Gwazi as like a supporting role in their cast of characters, whereas for SeaWorld San Diego, it was given a starring role, like truly. And it deserves it, because it's a solid ride.
It really is, and I think the theme is nice, colors are nice. But that's just the nice thing about this park, is they're under so many restrictions when it comes to the way the skyline can look and how it needs to blend with the sky. That
so sophisticated.
There is a really sophisticated kind of color palette that is equal and complementing itself throughout the park skyline, and it's probably one of the cleanest looking parks in North America, that's for sure. Right adjacent to the Ocean Explorer area, where Electric Eel is located, you have Sesame Street Bay of Play. Now, the funny thing about Sesame Street now is that right down in Chula Vista, a couple miles away, they now have the Sesame Place San Diego, which is a whole theme park that used to be Aquatica, the water park.
It used to be Soak City, right?
Yeah, not Soak City,
Chula Vista.
Aquatica, San Diego.
And now it's
Sesame Street, Sesame Place San Diego.
Yeah.
The funny thing is now, of course, they have that whole area here that has like the Big Bird Bistro, and then it has like 3 major flat rides, a giant splash pad, and a giant walk-through climbing area, which low-key is really cool though. We've climbed all over it in 2017.
It's a lot like
16. It was awesome.
I mean, Busch Gardens Tampa has the Sesame Street Safari.
Fun, yeah.
And then like SeaWorld Orlando's Shamu's Bay of Play used to be like this with the big climbing area and stuff before they demolished it all for Sesame Street land.
Now, what I find so funny now is, of course, they're coexisting. So in my head, I can't think of anything. I'm like, as of right now, it's a good little marketing preview. Like, oh, go check out our park in Chula Vista. Like, go check out the park just a few miles away. But I can't help but think there is no reason to have a whole Sesame Land over here if the same company is going to make just as much money sending people to the Sesame Park. So what I'm hoping to see, because it takes up quite some valuable real estate, this is definitely one of those SoCal parks that back in the day pioneered the industry but got built around quite a bit. I would really like for them to take some of the flat rides and keep them, perhaps retheme them, or at least just ship them straight over across the freeway.
Yeah.
And then use that area for a major new attraction, whether it maybe be a dark ride or maybe another roller coaster, whatever they can do, because again, the park is kind of landlocked or ocean locked, whatever you want to call it. And this area now seems to serve so much as a purpose, except for being a preview center for
especially
the big theme
since
park down the street.
Like Ocean Explorer is also a kiddie area, and it's also next to it. Like, it feels somewhat
there's a lot more to
strategic.
do than coaster enthusiasts think, because if you just look at the kiddie flat rides alone, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then we've got the splash pad, the climbing area. and the kid aquarium over here, and then you have all of Explorers Reef entrance. I mean, that alone can keep kids occupied for hours.
And I think the Chula Vista Park, I think Sesame Place, like, they're off to a really good start because they've added a lot of substance. They basically took
a giant water park and added a bunch of additional attractions.
They took the existing water park and added a lot of dry flat rides, like family rides, and like the Sesame Street block that Orlando has. But we haven't been yet. We'll probably go eventually, but I think the only thing that park needs now that it's open and sturdy is that it just probably needs a few more. It needs a few more dry rides, which I think it'd be a very clever marketing ploy to like take the flat rides at Sesame Street Bay of Play and then move them to SeaWorld, or to move them to Sesame Place and then market them as new rides, and people would fall for it.
No, I think so too.
And it wouldn't necessarily be divisive as much as it would be like, well, we want to sell you a season pass to both of these parks anyway. It's just now we're redistributing. Oh, you can see the footprint for the kiddie coaster.
Yeah, so the funny thing is they really did add a giant part of the park that used to be backstage. Several areas of the park that used to be backstage, they turned into Sesame Place. And
we're looking at it on Google Earth.
They took away the biggest... The big, scary, like, tall drop slides. Yeah. They took those away and turned it into a giant amphitheater. Overall, I mean, this is probably one of the most impressive family-oriented parks in the world because it is purely meant for families and kids, like Sesame Place and Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. But it's much bigger. It's very large. It's the size of a really nicely sized Aquatica, plus having several dry areas with roller coaster.
Yeah. It was already a strong regional really nice water park product.
And the way it's located on the hill, there really is a lot of park that they can even still work with if they wanted to. Because all the pathways that go up to the top of the hill where the slides start, this is a really unique park in the sense that, and when we went as Aquatica, we loved this Aquatica
park.
Because you don't really have to climb a lot of stairs. Because the nice thing about Aquatica Chula Vista Sesame Place San Diego, is that you get to just walk up the side of the hill, like in a giant circle that goes all the way up the hill, and all the slides are just kind of like up there. Yeah. So you don't have to walk up any stairs.
Just set up on the topography.
You just kind of walk all the way up the hill, like on a slope, and then you just join any of the it used to be 4 sets of slides, now it's 3 sets of slides. And you just, pick whichever one you want to take your way down, which is, half their slide lineup didn't require stairs, which is really unique. It's a very, Chula Vista thing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I really think that they should just either move those rides over to Sesame Place, or if anything, stop the SeaWorld stuff stop the Sesame Place stuff at SeaWorld, despite, I like it, don't get me wrong, but I just think that now there's a whole theme park for it. This is a great opportunity.
They need to differentiate.
Because the park is about the size of SeaWorld.
They need to diversify
look at this.
The marketing power, like the marketing pull of Sesame Street, and maybe pull their resources and funnel all of their Sesame Street energy into Sesame Place.
Yeah, because turning the Big Bird Bistro into its own, maybe new gourmet restaurant, having a whole new area that's kind of themed, whoever they choose to theme it to.
I think the climbing area is probably reaching the end.
Also, it's time to get rid of the arcade over here, so
Oh, you don't like the arcade? I love the arcade.
Okay, arcades are very California parks from the 80s, 90s, whatever, but I just don't think theme parks and arcades nowadays, if you're going to be a big boy park, it doesn't really work for me, honestly.
I mean, Disneyland still has an arcade.
The Starcade?
No, not the Starcade. Don't they have a... I guess they don't have a video arcade anymore. But Magic Mountain still has...
It'd be fun if they made one for Tron and Magic Kingdom. But that's a whole different story. Anyway, so let's head back to Explorers Reef. The park entrance. Right, obviously, across from it, you have the most iconic attraction there, the Sky Tower.
And that giant tree that's 100 years old.
Yeah, the Sky Tower is awesome because it has that really old kind of SeaWorld vibe to it, but it's the little pavilions.
Vaguely Japanese...
Oh yeah,
vibe to it.
Totally, which really works with how they built Manta 60s. Next to it, because Manta has that same kind of vibe they went for. And it has a little, just the landscaping is pristine.
The landscaping here is just so awesome. Money can't buy these incredible trees that are so old and so mature. Which is always my number one complaint of new parks and stuff is that it's just hard to make a park feel grown in without it just being several decades old. So the way that this park feels old is so much to its credit. In the same way that Disneyland feels old, not because it feels aged, but because it feels so grand and the landscaping and stuff is so pronounced and heavy and full. So
Now, the cool thing about Sky Tower is it's a double-decker Sky Tower, much like Orlando's, but actually being using both decks, which is fun.
mm-hmm.
It is a $6 upcharge, but it is complimentary for any season pass or annual pass holders. So we got in for free. Rode it a couple times. Awesome views of Mission Bay, San Diego, the Pacific Ocean.
It's a very
the rest of the
pleasant
park.
ride.
It's one of those must rides. I feel of all the Sky. Well, between this one and the Orlando one, this is the one. If you're gonna
Got
pay,
a nice remodel
this is the one you want to pay for. Yeah, it's just all very clean.
It was just, you could tell that like they remodeled it before they started charging extra for it. So it's kind of like, on the one hand, I know people felt kind of cranky about it being an upcharge.
I mean, this one has always been really nice.
But then on the other hand, it's like, well, it's a really nice product. And like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, if you're buying a one-day ticket to SeaWorld, this and the Sky Ride for that matter, which is also an upcharge now, probably wouldn't be on the average like single day ticket holders priority of like list priority anyway. So I feel like it really is just like a pass holder special kind of thing. And then like if you're there on a one day ticket and like you're like you really want to ride it, it's like, well, just ride it, like just pay the extra. It's not that big of a deal. It's like, I think it's worth it.
I think so too, for sure. Let's continue while we're right over there. Right next to it, you got the sea otters and the otter outlook, as well as
otters,
the dolphin points,
dolphins,
which is a couple of dolphin interaction pools and an exhibit you can look at. There's also a cool lookout on top of the hill with glass walls.
It's a little bit like SeaWorld Orlando's Key West area,
except it's
like
themed to the Pacific.
Chilling, but yeah, it's regionally appropriate.
Because it's funny because of course Key West is regionally appropriate to Orlando. I never really kind of made the connection.
Yeah, both parks have these like dolphin exhibits unrelated to the dolphin show that are like local color focused.
And then next up we have the big attraction historically, the Orca Encounter area, the Orca exhibits. Now you have the underwater viewing area, which is really nice here.
It's awesome.
And like Orlando, there's pretty much always going to be orcas in there. In Orlando, they only have 5 orcas and pretty much similar size facilities, perhaps a little bit smaller. But the orcas are frequently not in the viewing area pool because that's only used for dining with orcas in Orlando. But here, there's always something to look at. So when we walk down there, you can see it in the vlog. We were welcomed by like 5 or 6 whales in the pool. All the pools were open, so we just kind of swing around where they wanted. We hit it at the right time because they were all down in there. Really, really nice setup. Very, very nicely manicured. It's just a great presentation.
And again, it has that nice California flavor to it. Like the lumber that you could tell is 50 years old, but because of the climate, isn't rotten or dilapidated. It's just...
Yeah, the trees are all... It's all very... I mean, it's very San Diego in so many ways. The skywalks that historically were open, I don't think they've been open since like 2014 or something, but they're skywalks that go over the orca back pool, so we used to be able to see the orcas swimming in the water. That's no longer open to the public. But of course the stadium itself is. Stadium is an updated version that they relaunched in 2017 for the Orca Encounter, which is full of rockwork and waterfalls. A really, really nice approach. Orca show-wise, even though they're all called Orca Encounter here, San Antonio, Orlando, and San Diego, of course, this one is a completely different pace. It's slow. It just kind of is a lot more educational. The Killer Whale collection here with the nine orcas in the pod is phenomenal. They're a lot older. They're a lot larger. There's more bulls. Some males. Overall, it's just a lot more impressive, I feel. And the way that they do the shows is a lot more elegant. So it's almost like a completely different vibe when it comes to the animal interaction part of the killer whales of this park versus the other two, but in a good way. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely my favorite of all of the Orca presentations. We saw it 4 times on our trip.
Yeah, we only went there for 2 days. I mean, there were only 4 presentations at the time we were there,
we
and we watched all of them. Yeah. It's just that good. And they're really, I really highly recommend anyone that is even a remote fan of the killer whale stuff at the other parks, go check out the underwater viewing area and go see Orca Encounter. It's really, really good. Next up, we'll talk about the original ride. Well, the original... non-observation
This was
attraction.
The first thing, so I kept meaning, like, when we were there, I was like, when did Shipwreck Rapids open? I was like, when was this built? Because it just felt... This ride is so underrated, and in the lexicon of River Rapids rides, this is hands down one of the best rapids rides in the country.
It's never really discussed.
And, like, it just does not get talked about enough. It is a banger of a ride in general. Whether you like rapids rides or not, there's just no denying that this is one of the strongest examples of a river rapids ride. It has a fabulous, lengthy layout with animal exhibits, aquariums, and stuff.
And it's 100% integrated with the park. So it has dining areas, it has a restaurant, it has viewing areas, it has animal exhibits.
It goes under the restaurant, which is themed to a giant shipwreck, per the name, Shipwreck Rapids.
Yeah, the whole area is themed to like the ship that crashed onto Lost Island, and they created all these little camps, and they created all these little things out of it. There's a whole story. Funny. That was not reversed. Which is really, really cool.
But can you guess when this ride opened? It opened...
93.
No, later than that.
96.
It opened right after SeaWorld Parks Entertainment and Busch merged.
99.
99. Very good.
Oh, great. So we actually visited the park shortly after it opened then. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it opened May 29th, 1999.
So when I rode the first time was in 2001, I think.
I like to think that this ride was the first major influence in the marriage of the SeaWorld Parks Entertainment business model and the Busch Gardens business model, where obviously the Busch Gardens parks were very, very ride-centric. One of the first experiments that the SeaWorld parks employed with that merger was kind of turning SeaWorld San Antonio into a little bit of a Busch Gardens park by experimenting with roller coasters like the Great White and Steel Eel. And so to put that in perspective, actually Rio Loco might have already been, I don't know. SeaWorld San Antonio was always a bit more ride forward anyway because it was opened in the late 80s. So they opened with their log flume. I think the Rapids ride came slightly later, but Shipwreck Rapids, opened in the era of Apollo's Chariot and Steel Eel. So this was peak.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was a kid, this was the ride. Like when I went, I was a small kid and we used to live in Europe. My parents always really liked SeaWorld, so I never went to California to see family or something. SeaWorld was more the one thing we did. That was theme park related.
Your parents don't really care for rides that much. So
no, but they always talk about this
SeaWorld
ride
is such a
waterfall at the end.
Thing.
The infamous waterfall. And so I have a lot of appreciation for it. A funny little story I've told Alex this the other day when we were at SeaWorld. This is actually the first time when I learned how close we were to Mexico. Because, mind you, I was this 8-year-old kid from Netherlands, and I did not realize that San Diego pretty much borders Mexico. And so there was this huge group of visitors from Mexico. And I was like, oh yeah, look, they came from Mexico. And I was like, really? From all the way from Mexico? Not realizing they were literally a 10-minute ride from Mexico. I don't know, it's just a funny story.
So classic.
Whenever I look at this ride, it brings me back to that moment. But yeah, overall, great Rapids ride. I think my favorite part is the flamingo exhibit that's on it. And then also having the aquariums you go through. So this rapid ride passes by 2 sea turtle exhibits that you can also see from the midway inside the park, and you just kind of navigate straight through it. So it kind of feels like you're going through the pond with the animals in it. Really, really neat.
I'm trying to find a map of what this place, what the park looked like when this ride opened, because it was truly, aside from the Sky Tower and the Sky Ride, which were only barely rides as far as for ride's sake go. I mean, the Sky Ride used to take you to the restaurant, the Atlantis restaurant on the other side of the bay. So that was more of a practical application of that ride system. And then the Sky Tower was, it was only a ride in the most technical sense. But I feel like as far as a ride for the sake of it being a ride, like a thrill ride, like an attraction, I'm pretty sure this was their very first foray into that territory.
No, one thing that's a little disappointing about the restaurant aspect of things is the menu since COVID has kind of gone downhill. It used to be one of those places where there was a lot of really high quality alternating food, and now it's just honestly just burgers and chicken, whatever, fried chicken. It's really not that special anymore. But Shipwreck Rapids used to have one of the best dining quick service options in the industry. So hopefully they bring back kind of what was once the Shipwreck Reef Cafe menu. But I didn't notice that last time. It was kind of sad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure it'll come back. It's going to come back the way everything else did. I mean, it's funny to think going to this park this year. I mean, the park hasn't even been open a year since COVID. Am I right?
Well, with all the rides.
With the rides,
but they've been open as a zoo.
As a zoo. Because there's a Wikipedia page there's an entire Wikipedia page for Shipwreck Rapids, and that's I feel very symbolic of how impactful and impressive the ride is. There's also a little bit in there about the little submarine ride, and apparently demolition on the ride for the submarine ride happened right before the park reopened from COVID, which was 2021 for the rides, right?
It's stood there that long? I could have sworn they already removed it by the time I came back in 2018.
According to Wikipedia, but when the park reopened from COVID in 2021, that's what Wikipedia says. That the ride had all but disappeared, basically.
Interesting. Alrighty, anyway, so next up we have the touch pools or tide pools with the, what are those fish called? Are they called starfish? The little, star-looking fish you can touch?
Yeah, those are starfish.
Okay, I didn't know what it was called.
Sea stars.
Sea stars.
What do they call them in Dutch?
Sea stars.
They call them sea stars in Dutch?
Yeah, I translated. Yeah.
Well, what is it actually in Dutch?
Zeesterren.
Zeesterren, okay.
Anywho, so those are right over there. And it used to have this really cool aquarium called Aquaria World of Fishes. It's been closed for a while now. There's this pretty much this wooden wall straight in front of the entrance. So I hope they bring it back. It was a really neat aquarium. It's quite large too, so it'd be kind of a loss to have that aquarium gone.
It's
especially because there's another aquarium that's gone.
It's like
too.
Their general reef aquarium, sort of like the aquarium. This I feel like is the counterpart to the aquarium that's inside of the Manta ride area, where it's like general tropical reef. Obviously, you can find reef tanks and stuff in some of the other exhibits. Like in Orlando, you find them in the shark exhibit. Here, you can find reef tanks around in the shark exhibit, in the turtle exhibit, and in the gift shop, the exit gift area for Atlantis, probably among other places. But yeah, I remember really liking this aquarium on our past visits. It's also, because of Tidal Twister, it's kind of partially obscured. There used to be
it's funny how they fit in Tidal Twister. It's quite impressive.
They used to have the octopus aquarium.
That was right in the Bayside Stadium.
It's inside of the Bayside Stadium. But the octopus viewing was moved to Ocean Explorer anyway, so they probably just retired that exhibit. What is there to say about Toilet Twister?
Not much. We never written that because it was already closed again when we came back.
I think it was open for a couple of weeks and then it was closed.
So that is what it is.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I think it's a really neat fit. The fact that it fit in there is pretty impressive. So maybe we'll one day get to ride it. I do find it sad that the aquarium was retired because it would have been a really nice little high active area having the aquarium, the touch pools, and then Tidal Twister, but it is what it is. Yeah. The back of the park in general at SeaWorld San Diego is a little empty because Bayside Stadium is only used for special events like Electric Ocean stuff, but that's been a minute since they've done anything there. Then you have a lot of walkways that are really classic, like concrete walkways or whatever, asphalt walkways.
This is very 1960s infrastructure.
That's lots of palm trees, but there really isn't much going on. Now they've built this new, or they're currently building this new on the water kind of beer garden area where you can just relax. So that's all in construction, so there really isn't much to look at. There's an arcade back there. Also, don't really care for that because it's an arcade, and arcades are just arcades. Now, the Bayside Skyride is very nice because you take a skyride over the bay, past the marina, all the way over to what used to be that special restaurant. Now you just turn around and come back. But the views are awesome. That's definitely a highlight of SeaWorld San Diego. And then also back there you have access to Manta. So Manta can kind of be accessed from precisely in the middle of the park, but also from the infrastructure back by the Bayside Skyride, which is also where you can go to the Manta touch pools, which are quite popular. They're really nice. There's also underwater aquariums.
Oh yes, that's one of the other places. They've got
its own aquarium exhibit, but also the queue goes to the aquarium.
Under the midway.
So that's
very
actually kind of neat.
Use of space.
Yeah, and the touch pools for the bat rays have actually glass bottoms, so you can walk underneath them as part of the actual aquarium exhibit. So the queue is on the side of it. You don't really get to see it there. You have to go into the actual aquarium exhibit for it. But that's quite neat.
It's so interesting. I really, this ride has such a cool presence. Not just because it looks cool, but I feel like the entrance of the ride, and you go down the queue, and it feels like you really go somewhere. You go through the exhibit, you come out the other side, and kind of gradually go up this very Japanese rock garden-esque.
Yeah, the Manta theme is Japanese rock garden, which is nice.
It's such a nice. I just like that it's a queue. The entrance and the ride itself are a nice distance from each other, and once you go underground through the aquarium and pop out the other side, it kind of, I don't know, it feels like it kind of takes you to another place, like you've gone somewhere. I like the feeling transported by something in such a simple way.
Oh, totally.
They created a lot out of a very small space.
I mean, Manta here was very much like Manta in Orlando. It was the big, highly integrated aquarium concept coaster, except for here they had to work with that, first of all, not really having any coasters besides, the water coaster. and secondly, having the height limit. So they definitely went for a different kind of coaster. But the overall premise, the overall feel, the overall impressiveness of the integration is very similar to
It's got
Manta
that,
in Orlando here.
10 out of 10 curb appeal, just like Orlando's Manta.
Yeah, with the little splash thing and everything.
Swooping around with the ride marquee. I mean, I would almost argue that this one has even better appeal with the actual entrance. Because, like, Manta in Orlando serves double duty as, like, kind of being the entrance of the park marquee. And then you go over to the entrance of the ride, and the ride's not quite as much of a focus at its own entrance.
But here, in order to enter, you have to go down these stairs that kind of
like a spiral
around a rock that also has a coaster track
wraps
on it.
around it. It's just so cool. It's just they really went for it. Like when this park builds a ride, I feel like they really go for it in a lot of ways. Generally speaking. Some ways they go for it in terms of aesthetic, other ways they go for it in terms of
budget. Sometimes they go into it, for the whole thing.
We're talking about Emperor and how it's a little bare, but it's okay because Emperor is amazing. But we'll talk about that later.
So the coaster itself, family launch coaster with Mac. I'm sure everyone's seen it by now. Multimedia launch tunnel is really neat because you're the theme is that you're underwater and then these like giant rays come behind you and they swoop you up and then you just launch out.
This was only the second installation of Mac's now very popular, very successful, globally ubiquitous launch coaster product line. So I feel like at the time, this ride, the ride's wonderful. It has aged really well. But I feel like people don't give it enough credit for what it is because at the time, rides like these, just like this ride model wasn't that common. Mac did not have a huge presence in the US yet. It's definitely getting there. And rides like Copperhead Strike and Time Traveler are like the kind of Mac-launched thrill rides that people were craving after Blue Fire was built. So for some people, Manta was like, well, okay, we got our Blue Fire in the United States, but we want like a thrill ride. But Manta just continues to demonstrate the substance of that, of like what they accomplished with this ride and why, like, it was more than just being special for the manufacturer's sake and the product line's sake. The execution and the choices that they made with it, with like the entrance plaza and the aquarium integration and how the ride has two very distinct halves. It's just they earned themselves a great ride with this, and even as the Blue Fire clones and other Mac multi-launch rides start popping up everywhere and are becoming more common in the US, more common in Europe, like Manta still feels very, very special, very unique.
Oh yeah, it's such a different approach. Because obviously there's Thinking Dog Dash, the first thing I think of when I think of like a large-scale family coaster.
I forgot about that.
But then Thinking Dog Dash feels like such a cheap, childish way of doing it. It's where Manta really feels like, hey, we're going to go with a really high quality, we're going to go with aesthetic, we're going to go with something that is family friendly, but like adults will definitely appreciate, not Stinky Dog. So it really turned out great. And doing the multi-launch thing, as you mentioned, and having some pretty intense moments. The second half of the ride in particular, it has some really good airshow moments, and that helix is quite intense.
There's a little baby like Sky Rush moment as it's entering the 360 helix.
It's quite good.
Little swish moment. I feel like
operations are also usually
Slinky
great.
Dog Dash feels like Manta on a dime, which is so ironic because you wouldn't expect Disney necessarily to do something that another park has already done, but to do it cheaply. But when we're talking Orlando Disney versus California SeaWorld, that's exactly what happened, and I'm not even that surprised.
And the nice thing about this ride is also when it was added, it was the first major attraction. It takes up so much space. It still takes up, I think, the most space of any SeaWorld coaster there. Yeah, significantly so. It's just a massive coaster. It's quite spread out. It doesn't have a lot of height, but it has a lot of stuff low to the ground. And it's nice because they have those 2 stations, the 3 trains. The overall product is really, really strong. I think for a lot of people, it's still the favorite attraction at SeaWorld San Diego. I understand why. It's very, very polished.
They made great use of that space back there. You know, the area back there, like, there's a lot of underused space, like that infrastructure around the Bayside Sky Tower stuff. And Manta took up, like, a good half of it because there was just so much to work with. But it feels so natural. It doesn't feel like they made a lot of sacrifices. Like, they didn't have to compromise the area's loveliness and presence and quietness for Manta. It just feels very natural. It feels like it was the right choice to to use this real estate for. And they still, like, the flamingos have always been in that corner of the park as far as I know. So they were able to maintain their exhibit. Manta was incorporated in such a way.
No. The flamingo area was new.
Oh, it's new?
If I'm not mistaken, I was completely newly added. I mean, it's completely integrated.
Wait, I was looking at a map from 2004 just now.
If anything, the exhibit is new, because I remember them building it alongside.
No, the flamingos were here in 2004.
Yeah, but the exhibit is new for it.
Right, I mean, they rerouted it. They had to change the shape of it and everything.
Yeah.
This is a goofy park map that we're looking at from 2004.
I remember this one.
From, like,
that
era of SeaWorld Parks Entertainment. Where
especially the weird bubbles in the ocean here, or whatever.
Yeah.
Cirque de la Mer, whatever it's called.
This weird era of park maps for SeaWorld Parks Entertainment where everything was larger than life and the map was virtually impossible to read because it was trying to look like a freaking Lisa Frank poster. But yeah, it's like they did something a lot different with the shape of the flamingo exhibit, but they...
I mean, back there used to be quite kind of a vibe, because as a kid, there was like Pirates 4D, the big show.
Yeah, that's right over here.
That used to be in here, and this giant theater that's in the middle of the park.
Is that the freshwater aquarium?
No, the freshwater aquarium
Where
is
is
over
the freshwater?
here.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
No, moving away from Manta, Manta really great. Moving closer back to the bay, there's a giant theater that they've been using for special events. And back in the day, it was used for almost exclusively 4D shows. So when I went as a kid, they had Pirates 4D, whatever. It was really, I liked it a lot.
That's so funny.
And then they had Sesame Place, they had Sesame Street, Lights, Camera, Action, or whatever. So that was also a 4D show. But yeah, there's a pretty massive theater in here. It's like a 360 theater.
Wow.
Really cool. I really hope they bring something back in here, even if it's just an attraction, because it takes up a lot of space for SeaWorld standards.
See, I was looking at that thinking that was the freshwater aquarium,
no,
and not realizing,
okay,
the freshwater aquarium's over there.
Yeah, it's just a circle. Remember, you go in, it's just a circle of the exhibits.
Cute. I love the freshwater aquarium, both ironically
I'm surprised that
and unironically. It was so old looking.
Yeah, but it was very classic.
So
because now with having Aquaria, World of Fish is gone, having the Bayside Stadium Aquarium gone, having nothing in the 4D theater, and having nothing in the freshwater, pretty much except for the Bayside Skyride, the whole back of the park, that entire half circle back here, that's like really on the water.
Bayside Skyride is very isolated right now. Even
though it sounds like it shouldn't be back there.
Even though Manta is like physically close to it on the back half of it, Manta itself.
But Manta's entrance is all the way over by Shipwreck Rapids and the Orca. So like, because Manta
Bayside
is so
Skyride
large.
is so far away from the next attraction.
Honestly,
in every
they
direction.
should build a ride over here.
But I feel like that's what the Skyride feels so special and so hidden. That's another reason I feel like it's fine. You can charge $6 for it. It's still worth it.
No, honestly, now looking at the map, with a little luck, hopefully to build maybe even that Scream and Swing as room for the park right over the water here, because then at least it brings a pretty major attraction to the back of the park. As of right now, the amount of infrastructure there is bigger than the rest of the park, but there really isn't actually anything there anymore.
Yeah. It has this, like...
It's funny, because that's how the old park used to be. The old park had, like, the original Orca over here. It was here. You know, it was... You know, the old park was kind of back there.
It has such like an old, like, Cypress Gardens kind of feel to it. Yeah, like, oh, this is the park that used to be
slightly relaxing, but also slightly awkward.
Yeah,
because even in my lifetime, there was a lot more going on back there. Now it's the deadest it's ever been. Even though there's a lot more liveliness in the front of the park, you know, with all the new areas they've been building, I really hope that's the next focus area is the back.
Yeah.
But continuing on past the... old freshwater aquarium. You kind of spill out, and boom, you're now in like a really browsing area again. You're now over at Riptide Rescue, which is a small house breakdance. What kind of thing is it called?
It's a little like a little miniature troika.
It's a mini troika. That's what it is. Really, really fun. Actually, one of the best rides out there. It's really, really good.
And then they have the giant. The shark encounter that serves double duty.
Yeah, so this area with Riptide Rescue is also where the rescue store is, and it's also where the Turtle Reef and the shark encounter are, which are really heavy on the conservation, but especially the Turtle Reef. Turtle Reef recently reopened with reimagined aquariums, and the cool thing about Turtle Reef is that its conservation story is really kind of nice. So when you go throughout the exhibit, you have like interactive games, and you have this giant screen that shows all the rescued and re-released, or some of the rescued and re-released turtles, and they have trackers on them. You can see that they swam all the way across the world since they've been released. It's honestly really, really cool. And Riptide Rescue is a fun little ride to kind of tie it together.
That building, like that it's one building that used to be just sharks, I guess, or it used to serve some other purpose, the other side of it that's now... And the entrances are like... opposite of each other.
So I don't really know what exactly the other purpose was over here.
I think it was manatees.
The exhibits had... Oh, no, they've never had manatees.
Yeah, they did. In this park,
really?
This 2004 park map
That's crazy.
taught me that there was a manatee rescue at some point in San Diego. But yeah, somewhere...
because it was never all sharks, because the infrastructure doesn't connect inside at all.
Right.
Like, it's always been like this. The shark kind of it's not super old, but you can see it was never really connected.
Yeah.
But okay, so I guess they have manatees there.
So yeah, turtle...
Okay, now it's all...
So the manatee thing was all probably relocated to Orlando because that's geographically where they would belong. So, I just love that building, that aquarium that is 2 aquariums in one, and both of even though the entrances are across from each other, they both exit into the rescue area. It's just a very clever...
Well, yeah, the nice
crowd
thing
control,
about
crowd
Turtle Reef
funneling.
is that you really do have your own entrance to it, and then it's quite nice.
You can kind of tell
how
Turtle
different
Reef's
it is.
entrance used to be a service road. Obviously, they spruced it up quite nicely, but it's clear that it didn't used to be a midway.
I think it was a midway. No, it was a midway from Manatee too, because it's right on the map you just looked at.
Yeah, but I feel like it wasn't always.
Yeah,
it just leads
maybe
you
not
directly
originally.
into the gate that exits the park, and then you hang a left to enter the exhibit.
That's nice to dress up though. Landscaping, signage.
And look at, the shape of the midway. It's like a perfect, regulation road shape to it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speculating here.
But yeah, anyway, let's talk about Turtle Reef. So just recently reopened with some tank enhancements. Really nice.
They have a
pretty much what it is, exactly what it sounds
collection
like.
Of 3 or 4 different species of
sea turtles. Yeah, and it's honestly really pleasant. They have a giant glass window that's almost like half dome, so you can really stand in the exhibit while the turtles swim over you, which is really neat.
I mean, I thought Orlando's turtle setup was nice, but this one is really stunning and just huge, like a huge exhibit.
That's the nice thing about this park is historically it just is the better, bigger exhibit park, and so it's kind of even with the 3 aquariums that we so loved in the last visit, now being gone, it's still one of those parks that exhibit wise is really strong because their shark encounter is also incredible.
Amazing.
You start above the big tank.
I love the approach to it too. It's like it's a little garden moment, little garden vibe.
Oh yeah, totally with the waterfalls and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you start on top and you're above the giant pool, the giant tank that the finale goes through, and you see all the sharks swim below you. And it's kind of themed to being outside on the beach and looking down into the shark reef.
Which Orlando's doesn't do that.
No, not at all. And
you get the shark restaurant, or you get the tunnel underneath, but you don't get to look over top of it.
And the shark collection here is much more impressive. I feel like there's a lot more going on than Orlando's. Orlando, I must say, has obviously like the regular exhibit within there with all the other fishes, and it has the modern enhancement, all the projection mapping. So even though Orlando's exhibit feels kind of old around the walls, it has a lot of cool enhancements now. But this one kind of feels more of like its own complete product.
This one, well, the reef tanks on the Orlando one are really cool. Like, I like that it has the tropical fish reef tank and it has the lionfish tank.
Uh-huh.
It also feels a little bit like it's funny that those are there. Like, they're there just because they're there. Whereas here, it's a little bit more
sharks only
cohesive.
Situation.
Yeah, it's a bit more focused. It's like, this is sharks.
And the nice thing about this is you have so many more opportunities to just look at the sharks, because in Orlando, your real opportunity to look at the sharks is only when you go through the glass tunnel at the end.
Yeah.
But here, it's like you see them from above, you see them from the side. There's a couple of smaller ponds.
SeaWorld,
and then you go through it at the bottom, like through the giant tunnel. But then afterwards, you can still step off to the side, and they have like this half-dome glass.
Yes.
You can step into the exhibit. So like however long you want to admire the sharks, you can literally spend 2 hours in there, and it's fine.
There's like 3 points of
sharks.
access for the main shark tank, whereas Orlando's has like 1.5.
One, pretty
the
much.
Restaurant counts
Count the restaurant.
Count the restaurant as half, because you can't just go in there and look at the sharks unless you're eating. But yeah, for the shark exhibit in Orlando being the shark exhibit, it's actually a bunch of things and also sharks, and the sharks are just the one exhibit at the end, and there's only like one opportunity to look at the shark tank in the shark exhibit, and it's the conveyor belt.
And same, that's really the focus of the whole exhibit. It's just shark, shark, shark. Which is funny because we took with my dad the second day of this trip, and he hadn't been since probably 2006.
He's like, I want to see the sharks. I'm like,
and like the first thing I wanted to do was like see the sharks. So I went straight to this exhibit. It was kind of fun.
That was so cute.
Right over here, we also
you'll see Sean's dad in a little brief cameo on the sky ride in our vlog. we didn't provide any explanation for him
For his
cameo. So if you saw the vlog already and you're wondering like, who is that? And it's like, that's Sean's dad. That's my father-in-law.
So right in that same area, we also have the sea lion amphitheater with sea lions and walrus, whatever, and otters in the show. And
wait,
they have
that one has otters too, or is it?
I mean, most of them do. They like they go through.
Oh yes, the little one. Yes, like the little. Yeah, okay.
It's all the same stuff. Yeah. And then they have a seal harbor and a sea lion exhibits. Now, funny enough, this is the one in San Diego is not quite as large. It's kind of small, actually. There's really not that many on display, but it's also California, so having a whole Pacific sea lion thing. It's the sea lions live in Mission Bay.
Totally dawned on us while we were there because So my sister and her husband and the girls, our nieces, came to visit, and we had a ball
prior to it. They were here in SeaWorld Orlando.
And one of the favorite exhibits, and when we took my parents to SeaWorld too, and everyone agreed that the Pacific Point at SeaWorld Orlando was like a huge hit with my family.
It's a
because
giant
we're from Northern
Pacific,
California.
Yeah, Pacific Northwest,
and SeaWorld San Diego doesn't have an attraction like that because they don't need one.
because most people who are there have seen them in real life.
It dawned on us as we were like, oh, their pinniped exhibit is so small because they do not have this need for a Pacific Northwest Santa Cruz, Monterey-esque themed exhibit because we're right here.
Exactly.
We're physically right there. So that's actually a special asset for Orlando, is having that Northern California themed corner.
It's quite large, too.
And it's nice and secluded. It's a dead end. It's off to the left of the Pinniped Stadium. If you don't make a point of going there, you'll miss it. You can't just walk through it on your way to something else. And it also provides great views of Kraken and Mako.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right in the same area is also the entrance to the Dolphin Amphitheater. Quite large, actually. They added bleachers to it over time.
It's so pretty.
It's one, kind of like Waterworld at Universal Studios Hollywood. They had to add bleachers to the top of the stadium because it was just so popular. This one is very pretty. Funny enough, SeaWorld San Diego still has some of the old theater themes because Dolphin Days has not been updated since they moved away from Blue Horizons, and neither has the theater for the sea lions. But in Orlando, the only theater not updated is the Orca Theater, as we're here in San Diego. The Orca Theater has all the new modern rock work and stuff. Mm-hmm. But then in San Diego, the other two theaters haven't updated yet, as we're in Orlando. The sea lions and the dolphins have all naturalistic looks now. So I wonder if they're gonna do that here too.
The approach up to this one, Orlando's has a nice approach.
Really nice approach in Orlando.
Also, but you can also see where they they kind of hastily added the ADA friendly, less steep zigzag walkway right over the top of some of the exhibits. Whereas this one, it's a bit more permanent looking. But yeah, this is a great theater. We saw the show just kind of we weren't even planning on seeing the show, and then we caught it just at the right time, and then we were very impressed with it.
Yeah, because the pilot wheels are all here. So they had some pilot wheels in Orlando. They moved down here, and they already had the pilot wheel here. So half of the Dolphin Day show is actually the pilot wheel section. Really, really cool because they're such different creatures, and you really don't get a chance to see them much.
They're so underrated. They're so cute. They're little baby, little tiny orcas. But yeah, I really liked the show. It was just the right length. The sequence at the end was really quite amazing. They brought all 16 of their dolphins out. And at one point, all 16 of the dolphins were out of the water at the same time.
Yeah, it was quite cool.
Really dope. So,
SeaWorld San Diego's always had quite an amazing animal aspect of things, and they've always had good control of. Well, not really control. Sounds kind of weird, but just their choreography and using a lot of animals at the same time was always kind of seemed seamless there. I mean, even the last One Ocean show before Orca Encounter was added. They had, what was it? I think they used all, at that point, 10 whales in the same show, all 10 orcas. That's impressive. It's, stuff that nowhere else on Earth that happens. Next up, we're going to move a little bit further down to the other edge of the park, and we're going to talk about Penguin Encounter. Facility-wise, it's a little animals. Old, but it definitely feels classic. But they're also the only place in North America that has the
Emperor Penguin.
Exactly what in the dive coaster is called Emperor. Really cool. They're really massive. I kind of didn't realize because this was my first penguin encounter I've seen anywhere, I think, back in the day, and I never really realized that it was so unique because of the emperor penguin. But now I think about it, I haven't seen the emperor penguin anywhere else, so that's kind of cool. And there's also an outdoor exhibit that has some of the is it Argentinian, Chilean?
Chile. I think. Well, they have a name. I call them Chilean penguins because that's where they're mostly where they occur. Is like.
But yeah, they're the warm weather ones. Yeah.
And like the Horn of South America, they have a name, but I forget. But they're really cute. Six Flags Discovery Kingdom has them too.
Yeah, they do.
And they're just like these cute little warm weather penguins.
And then there's Wild Arctic. Now this Wild Arctic is phenomenal. So obviously, just like Orlando's. It used to have the four simulators inside.
Star Tours.
That have obviously since closed. They're still there, but they're not being used anymore. And then you would exit into the actual exhibit. This exhibit is outdoor, but you walk through it indoor. But there's a couple of like open air moments. The Beluga facility is awesome. They have these sea otters, the giant otters, mostly found in Alaska. And then of course there's some seals peppered throughout. And then they have a giant walrus exhibit. They used to have polar bears, where the sea otters are now, but the sea otters are actually kind of almost more unique, because I don't think I've seen sea otters many other places. They're just these massive otters. They're like so big. They're like sea lions.
You'll see them. Yeah, the only place that I associate them, obviously, with the Monterey Bay Aquarium. That is like the official... The Monterey Bay Aquarium, which I grew up going to quite frequently, has like two mascots. The sea otter and kelp.
Yeah.
because the first successful like kelp forest grown in captivity, maintained in captivity, was at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. But yeah, so I just love the like Pacific sea otters being accessible and visible at aquariums. It reminds me of my childhood.
Oh, these are Alaskan, but yeah.
Well, they're Pacific too, aren't they?
Well, I guess it's Pacific all the way there, but yeah. I don't know. Whenever I hear of Pacific, I kind of think of Pacific sea lions. Stuff that's California Pacific. Anyway,
I wonder if they have different ecotypes like the orcas, where if like they're technically the same otter, the ones in California and the ones in Alaska, but they're like native to these different regions, so they have different like evolutionary traits that they've acquired over time. I don't know.
Beluga-wise, it's cool because they have 3 belugas, and the setup is quite large. There's a large area you can watch upstairs, and there's a really large underwater area. Obviously larger and perhaps nicer. I would say nicer for sure than the Orlando counterpart. Yeah. So we really like this Wild Arctic. And this Wild Arctic is also going to receive, like 99% sure it's happening, a coaster. So instead of where the simulators are right now, they're going to be building a coaster station. And then it's going to be Arctic snowmobile themed.
Yeah.
So you would leave the building, and then there's a triple launch roller coaster, kind of like rescue coaster. What is it called? Wavebreaker rescue coaster at SeaWorld San Antonio, but instead on a little more.
I think this one's going to be.
It's
going to be like a bit like the next step up from like Manta in terms of intensity.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot more like the one at SeaWorld in Australia.
Yeah,
not same theme park, or not same chain, but similar coaster. It's going to be like that, so that'll be fun. It'll be nice to have a Wild Arctic themed attraction again that exits into the exhibit, and it also happens to be an actual, new coaster for the park.
Great to have another new coaster. SeaWorld San Diego really spoils us, I think, because no one has ever considered this a coaster park, but now they've realized they're on this coaster kick. I mean, at one point they were on track to have built 4. If you count Tidal Twister, they were poised to open 4 roller coaster attractions in 4 years. With the Wild Arctic one originally having been scheduled for 2021 following the 2020 opening of Emperor, which obviously didn't happen.
It was going to be 2018 Electric Eel, 2019 Tidal Twister, 2020 Emperor, 2021 Wild Arctic Coaster.
It's amazing. I'm really, really impressed. I'm grateful and relieved and surprised, honestly, that the Wild Arctic Coaster is still happening, because it was pulled... by mid-2020, it was just obvious that was not going to happen as they put it, or as it was told, anytime soon. Nobody thought that it was going to happen anytime soon, if at all. So the fact that it's back on the table is really, really fortunate, very exciting. So I think the next, really, we just have our coasters, the big coasters to talk about. Journey to Atlantis here is in the timeline of Atlantis. Oh, I've never noticed the trident that the ride goes around.
That was part of the relaunch. Yeah,
that's so funny. That's clever. In the lexicon of Journey to Atlantis coasters, because it quickly became the signature like SeaWorld coaster experience. It's one that all three of the SeaWorld parks share, albeit all three of them are extremely different rides. And they've, for a lot of people, the Journey to Atlantis coasters between the SeaWorld parks have trended down. And I wouldn't necessarily consider it a downtrend. It was just that all three parks needed different things out of their respective Journey to Atlantis ride experiences.
Yeah, one needed to be a dark ride, one needed to be the park's first coaster, and the other needed to be a big water ride.
Yeah.
So, they're all kind of different needs.
I really enjoy all three of these Journey to Atlantis coasters for what they are, and I think at this point, San Diego's is probably my favorite. Orlando's...
Despite its new colors being kind of questionable, it's still a great ride.
I feel Orlando's definitely feels like a shadow of its former self, and I haven't ridden it in a while. It's been probably over a year. But I'm often distracted in the dark ride portion of the ride by what is no longer functioning. Especially like the big, the Medusa head or whatever that used to pop out like before the main lift hill.
Yeah.
Like there was just a lot going on in there, and I feel like I didn't even ride it until 2016. And I'm sure by then a lot had already changed. It's just very apparent that the Journey to Atlantis in Orlando used to be a much more substantial, like, Universal Studios, Disney level dark ride experience that also had the water coaster drop and then, like, the surprise, like, coaster track bit at the end. Whereas SeaWorld San Diego's was always about, like you said, about being this park's first coaster. It has a really, like, enjoyable layout that is still totally unique to this ride.
And it's quite impressive how they have engineered this ride, because it has a regular lift hill, but then the regular lift hill has like a U-turn around the second elevator.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of attached to the elevator structure, which is hidden in a giant Atlantis
it's like a
tower.
big silo.
Then you go into the next tower, which has the actual drop in it.
I think the silos are like really attractive looking. I don't know what else to call them other than silos, but they're really pretty looking, and they serve a purpose. So you like enter the one that the drop is inside of, right? Like, and then you continue,
and you move through it,
and then you pass through it into the elevator. And this is still the only Mac water coaster with an elevator lift hill, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, elevator system.
The most similar. It's quite similar to like Pilgrim's Plunge for any of you who were fortunate enough to ride that in its short-lived time, or like Divertical at Mirabolandia, like these two-shaft elevator water coasters from Intamin, where you kind of
just reminded of Perilous Plunge never had an elevator lift,
and up.
But yes. Perilous Plunge?
Yeah.
It didn't. It just had a regular lift.
Yeah, it just had a regular lift.
I know, but you're talking about...
I'm talking about Pilgrim's Plunge.
Oh, you said Perilous.
Oh, I did?
Yeah, sounds like... No,
I meant Pilgrim's Plunge.
Yes.
World. Because of that very distinct, reverse hourglass-looking left hill shaft, where, you go up it, and you kind of tilt to the left, and then you tilt to the right as you're going up it. Whereas a ride like Cobra's Curse, for example, they've streamlined it even more by shifting you left and right instead of having the vehicle elevator actually feel those curves.
One thing that's fun about this coaster is that it has an actual coaster part to it for a water coaster, and it's completely neatly designed.
Yeah.
So the coaster part is quite thrilling because there's kind of two coaster parts, but it's also just nicely landscaped. And one thing that was really fun when it first opened is that so when you exit the attraction, you have to, instead of going over the station, you actually go below the station. And it's quite far down. Then you come all the way up near the entrance plaza. Now, and you circumnavigate underneath the queue itself as well. So you there's quite some underground infrastructure here, funny enough. But then when you come up, you face this aquarium. Now it's rays and fish, but it used to actually be a dolphin exhibit. It used to be the Commerson dolphins that were then moved to Aquatico and it opened in Orlando in 09, 07, 06, whatever it was.
2008.
So when you look at it from above, you can still see how there was a holding pool and how it was the main exhibit. But now it's just turned into aquariums. It's actually quite neat because that's one of the cleanest exits of any attraction.
This ride has a great presence, and it's a really pleasant ride. And this is, the San Antonio Journey to Atlantis is just a Max Super Splash, which is a water coaster essentially, but it's a different product line, and for Mac rides, they've been selling it more as a shoot-the-shoot type of ride, more than
also,
a roller coaster
no
type of ride.
theming to it whatsoever.
Yeah,
no.
San Antonio's has no theming, and it's very straightforward. It's still a cute ride, and again, it was really about just giving the park another water ride because
Texas,
they
SeaWorld,
I think
water.
they were getting ready to demolish the log flume. I think it closed shortly, a few years after Journey to. I could be wrong, but I think they were just like ready to amp up the water attractions over there, and more than because they already had multiple roller coasters, more than what they needed. Like it wasn't a roller coaster that they needed with Journey to Atlantis; it was a shoot the chute with giant, like 20-passenger boats to get a lot of people really wet really quickly. And in that way, it's a success. I don't know if SeaWorld San Antonio will ever be the kind of park that like needs a super integrated like roller coaster experience with like the aquariums and stuff, like something like Manta or the Journey to Atlantis.
It doesn't quite have the competition like that.
It's not like it's just not
like they're like an hour from like a Disney park or something.
It just doesn't need it. But then I feel like everything that SeaWorld San Antonio does these days is quite impressive. I think Wavebreaker was a cool choice. I'm not personally a huge fan of it, but it's a likable ride.
Well, it's nice it goes all over the water.
The turtle area with like Texas Stingray in it and stuff is like a slam dunk. Like that's a really nice marriage of like amusement park rides and animal exhibits, just like right there in one even stroke. And then there's Emperor, which I think it's time to talk about. We're saving Emperor for last because we know, like, for all of our more coaster-centric listeners, this was, like, the main reason to listen to this podcast at all. So if you've been waiting for us to talk about Emperor, thank you for sticking it out with us through our entire...
So, Emperor. Emperor is interesting in a way that the ride itself, on a roller coaster standpoint, phenomenal. Absolutely one of our favorite MB&Ms. It's quite amazing how different it runs it on the B&Ms, and also how intense it is.
That's our favorite B&M dive machine, and that's saying a lot because we have ridden a majority of them.
Landscaping-wise, it is probably the least landscape coaster SeaWorld's put out, like, in a very long time. It's just almost embarrassingly under-landscaped, but the coaster itself is just really, really good. And I think that's all that really matters at the end of the day because it's not like it's concrete underneath it. It's still gravel, but
infrastructure around the ride. There's no buildings. There's a covered locker and shop area. The station is completely uncovered, and then the queue is uncovered with the exception of the station area where there's boat sails. Just two large boat sails covering where people queue up for the individual rows of the ride. I mean, this ride takes minimalist to a new level. It is so, and in a way, it's kind of a vibe. Like it is so deliberately understated.
It's very California in a way because it really feels kind of like on the beach, even though it's
San Diego
Emperor
has
Penguin, I guess.
The luxury of being like, we don't have to build a lot of buildings. We don't need a lot of roofs. Here, when you walk up to the ride, it has such an amazing wow factor because the entire roller coaster just feels completely unobscured. It is so visible and present in its space. The only thing obscuring any of the ride from view from the midway is just the berms that they situated around the rides just to give
around the elements,
around the element, just to give it a little bit of topography variance. But I mean, it's just, I don't know. There's, in a way, it's like a stark contrast from the lush nature of, especially some of the older parts of the park. It's hard to believe that this ride is in the same park as the area around Mesa.
Which is due to the fact that it took a parking lot.
It used to be a parking lot. So yeah, you could do a lot worse. In the California pedigree of B&M floorless coasters, that used to be a parking lot. We've come from Medusa to Scream to now Emperor. I really can't say enough great things about the roller coaster itself. I could ride this all day.
Yeah, so let's talk about it a little bit. So obviously, in the newer H coaster, lift goes really fast. But the nice thing about this is that they made this careful choice of having the turnaround on top be like a full turnaround. And you get an amazing view of Mission Bay, and then you face the ocean and the rest of the park for the drop. Really, really neat. Ride itself, super intense. Incredible pacing, something you just are not used to from B&M coasters. So having
the swiftness of this ride's pacing is so unlike a B&M dive machine.
It doesn't feel like a B&M dive machine, but like in a really good way because there's no drag, there's no pacing issues. It is just, okay, you drop, and then it's just really intense all the way to the end. Even the last turn It's just like super high speed turn straight into the magnetic brakes. And you have this giant magnetic brake run to slow the train down.
It slows so gently.
It's crazy how good this
Even the brake
ride
run is a pleasant highlight. It's amazing how this ride and SheiKra are technically part of the same product line, and they just could not be more dissimilar.
And then the elements are quite unique because you have an Immelman, which, I mean, we've seen Immelmans on water.
But this is a tight Immelman.
But it's a tight Immelman.
It's not like a big sweeping, like, Griffin SheiKra Immelman. This thing, you just tear right through it.
And then you have this overbank, almost like top hat kind of hammerhead turn, which the park says is not an inversion, but it's quite definitely an inversion.
Like an inversion.
And then after that, which you go through with so much speed that if you sit on the edges, you kind of get like a whip out of it. Then you have this step-up underflip kind of situation, really unique for a wind coaster, for a dive coaster. Hasn't been done before. Really intense, very different. And then you finish up after that with a giant stretched-out corkscrew. Again, something we haven't seen before in a dive machine. And then you have that really high-speed fan turn into the final brakes. Pretty much every inch of this ride feels very, very unique, even though it has like a couple elements that we've seen on other coasters in some way, shape, or form, even maybe a dive machine like the Immelman. The way that Emperor navigates the ride and the speed at which it does so makes it just so much different, like so intense, so different. I don't really know how else to describe it. It's a great ride.
The elements look like your typical drawn-out B&M inversion fare, but it's hard to appreciate from ground level just how much taller the first drop is than the entire rest of the ride. And that's where they see amazing success here, because none of the other elements of the ride concern themselves with being anywhere near as tall as the first drop. And that's where the pacing comes from. This thing tears it up. It just goes... Does this ride have 3 trains?
No, 2. This is just a station mechanism.
Because the little... Oh, I see it. Okay. We're still on Google Earth, like, admiring this goofy ride with no station and, like, nothing covering the maintenance bay or anything. But yeah, basically the size of the inversions, all of the elements, in relationship to the height of the drop is where this ride just sings. Because it just barrels through it. It's so swift, satisfying, smooth, and in a lot of ways it is some of the great qualities of a dive coaster, great qualities of wing coasters even, with some of these elements like the giant stretched out corkscrew and the step up underflip. Like, these are very wing coastery kind of moments that when you sit on the outside of the train on the edge, you definitely, it just lends itself to some of the more forceful wing coaster products. Something like Phoenix at Toverland comes to mind when I think of a wing coaster of a similar scale and execution to Emperor. And then also floorless coasters. Like, this is a traditional looping coaster. It's their floorless coaster, a floorless looper that just also happens to have a vertical drop. It just accomplishes so much in such a compact package. It checks so many boxes.
And it's funny because people are like, oh, it's a small coaster. I mean, first of all, dive coasters never do a whole lot. Second of all, if you look at the stats, it's still longer than Valkyria, for example, in Sweden. And honestly, it feels a lot like Valkyria at Liseberg, because it kind of has a really modern approach to it, doing kind of the inversions, doing the turns. It's just phenomenal.
And it's so much more than what a lot of dive coasters are. Baron is a great ride, a little on the short side. It's still longer than like Krake at Heide Park. Certainly longer and more substantial than like the first generation dive coasters. But then I feel like this ride still has more to offer than even like Griffin or SheiKra or even Valraven. Like, I didn't care for Valraven. Something about the pacing just felt a little too much like what we had already seen. Valraven feels like some of the some of the weaker qualities of SheiKra, but like none of the strengths. Then you have Emperor, which is like the other side of the coin. It has taken so many great qualities from 3 different product lines from B&M and distilled them and encapsulated them into this compact little 2,400 foot coaster that is just such a slam dunk. I mean, this would be a great ride for any park. So it's really special that SeaWorld has it because they have so few coasters. It's their first B&M. We've never seen a B&M coaster on this side of the country before. I mean, aside from Silver Bullet at Knott's Berry Farm, you'd have to go all the way to Magic Mountain to find another B&M. And it's also the West Coast's first B&M dive coaster. It's just, I just can't say
it's funny, there's only 4 parks on the West Coast that have
B&Ms.
It's Great America. Well, 5, I guess. It's Discovery Kingdom, Great America, Knott's, Magic Mountain, and SeaWorld. But just a couple of years ago, just like in the early 2000s, there were only 3 parks that have B&Ms, and now there's one in SeaWorld, one in Knott's. But overall, this feels very unique for the region. It feels like a great addition. And when you're in a region, or like on the East Coast, even where there's just a bunch of B&Ms everywhere, you really start appreciating the kind of presence that a B&M has at a place like SeaWorld San Diego, almost like Electric Eel. It feels like this giant coaster, even though it's not quite as large as other B&Ms in the state. It really has this massive presence. I really like that.
If you travel a lot, you've ridden a lot of coasters, you've ridden a lot of B&Ms, this ride is still going to feel special to you. It's going to feel special in a way that maybe some of the other B&Ms in the state or really anywhere are going to feel like reminiscent of things you've already ridden. Somehow this ride just feels like it really defies categorization. When you ride it, it feels like such an eclectic collage of things that B&M has done, and even some things that feel new, to the point where you're going to ride it and you might say to yourself, like, oh, there's really nothing quite like this in B&M's lexicon right now. And that's saying a lot. That's really special. It's a really special ride for SeaWorld San Diego to have ended up with. So,
having said that, going with the right expectations, the coaster itself is great, but yeah, the landscaping, of course, is not amazing.
They have this very narrow pathway between like the business end of Journey to Atlantis and the business end of Wild Arctic.
To get to the ride. And it's kind of like its own little ride promenade. And they built a little garden next to it. There's some benches and stuff. But
I still love, and like you see a lot of the ride from Journey to Atlantis, so it has its marquee there, and that looks great. And you walk through the corridor, and you come around the corner, and it's there to the right, and it looks awesome. But yeah, it's a lot of subtlety there. It's very, I don't want to say plain, because it's not plain. It's very understated. Very, very understated. There might even be room for some more landscaping.
No, I do hope that they do some more landscaping.
I would like some more landscaping.
But overall, it's just a great addition. We're glad it's there. We are definitely already planning on coming back soon to ride it some more, because it's such a good coaster. So if you haven't gotten convinced yet, hopefully this convinced you to go. But definitely give SeaWorld San Diego a visit. It's one of our favorite parks in the country. It has a really pretty solid coaster lineup that people don't necessarily think about when they think of coasters. But between Journey to Atlantis, Electric Eel, Manta, and Emperor, there's 4 really solid coasters that definitely are worth the run to the park. So hopefully you will visit soon if you haven't yet, and if you have, come back. And we know we'll be back soon.
Yes, and we'll be talking about it once again.
That is true.
We love talking about this part.
And stay tuned on thecoasterkings.com. We're going to release some articles about the best SeaWorld coasters, best B&M coasters, and of course the best SeaWorld and Busch Gardens parks that obviously mention SeaWorld San Diego. On our YouTube channel, we have the new SeaWorld San Diego vlog. And then check out our social media accounts for lots of new content, pictures. We took some amazing sunset pictures from Mission Bay of the park that we're really excited to share. And of course, TikTok is TikTok. We got some TikToks on there as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see you online. We thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you later.
Bye.